Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Dalton Gentry, and it is Friday, which means it is going to be part 2 of a billion-part series as we travel through a little series that I'm liking to call How to Read Books Good, a breakdown of How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas C. Foster. Now, we are going to tackle Chapter 2 today, which is actually a pretty good chapter. Honestly, every single chapter in this book is a wonderful chapter. Because every single chapter gives you something you should really focus on, something you can learn, and is entertaining at that. And this is Chapter 2, Nice to Eat With You, Acts of Communion. So today we're going to be talking about food and representations of food in literature and what eating a meal means in a literary fashion. Now, eating a meal together is something that we do often. We are social creatures. You might invite somebody over to dinner, you're going out on a date, you're going to share a meal first. And the reason for that is that builds trust. When you are sitting down and sharing a meal with someone, you are building a relationship with them, a trust with them. And that is the case in literature as well, as Mr. Foster here seems to point out quite a bit. Now, sharing a meal is attuned to communion. Sitting down, the idea of breaking bread with someone, sharing in this ritualistic act with someone. Now, communion also shoots over to a Judeo-Christian ideology thing. Ignore that. It's just lack of better word, in my opinion, because I think this is pointing at something bigger in a literary aspect. Because when we sit down with someone, we are opening ourselves up to that person. It's a very primal thing as well. If I say, hey, you want a cigarette, no big deal there. We had our moment, we moved on with life. But food is a necessity of life. Food is something that at its base level is very primal. It is something that we need. It is a sustenance, if you will. I just realized I just spent 30 seconds describing what food is, but you get the point of what I'm going at here. Food, at its base level, animalistic survival. So to invite someone in and to share that with someone, it's a little bit more than just, lending somebody a book or, saying, hey, have a cigarette. Sitting down and having a meal with someone, it's a big deal. It really is. And if an author is taking the time to write this into the literature, as Mr. Foster here points out quite a bit, it's going to mean something. It's going one way or the other, because writing about food is not too exciting. Now, Thomas Foster starts out this chapter with a lovely little bit here talking about Freud and how a student or somebody of Freud, some assistant, went up to him one day and pointed out and said, hey, Freud, it's a nice cigar you're smoking there. It's a little phallic, don't you think? And if I may quote from page number 7, the great man responded simply that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. I don't really care if the story is true or not. Actually, I think I prefer it to be some kind of apocryphal, since made-up anecdotes have their own kind of truth. Still, it is equally true that just as cigars may be just cigars, so sometimes they are not. So, as with any good bit of literary analysis, there's always that little bit of gray area. Sometimes it's just about food. Sometimes we're just talking about this meal because it's a necessity. We have to add that in. But oftentimes, there will be more to it. So for this today, I actually have 3 examples. Examples that have been previously cited on Strip Cover Lit that will point towards this idea of communion with food in different measures, different ways. So let's start from the very top here, a series that we are currently working our way through, The Hunger Games, ironically enough titled. So in The Hunger Games, this is something I noted in, I believe, our first episode of The Hunger Games, because it is oddly sexual, and it involves food. So this is from page 8 of Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games. This is Gale and Katniss sitting together. He tosses a berry in a high arc towards me. I catch it in my mouth and break the delicate skin with my teeth. The sweet tartness explodes across my tongue. Be ever in your favor. Moving forward a little bit, the very next paragraph, we start going towards the breaking of bread. I watch as Gale pulls out his knife and slices the bread. phallic, that's fine. And then out of nowhere, old Katniss says, he could be my brother. As if, it's something you think about is when I'm talking about slicing bread, and like, well, that guy could be my brother because he slices bread just like my brother. No, that's sexual. That is sexual and phallic at its finest. It's just getting steamy in here. So we are seeing this as an example here where food is being used as an outlet to address sexuality, to address this longing between the two characters that is not necessarily said and is brilliantly disguised in young adult literature, but it's definitely there. And something back in the little brain starts really ticking when we get these choice select words and these weird transitions into he could have been my brother, which is, Katniss putting herself on the back burner and be like, hey, time to cool down a little bit. He could be your brother. He's too close to form a relationship. But food is what brought her to this. Next example. I'm going to be Smokey this the entire show now. Portrait of the artist as a young man. James Joyce. This is something we tackled very recently here on Strip Cover Lit, and there is a great example of how food can be used to describe what's going on internally with a character. Not just a sharing of food between two characters, but an internal struggle within one. In this particular text here, Stephen is seen eating food 2 times. Let me back that up a little bit. I'm not sure if there are more examples, but 2 huge examples in this where it is made very blatant that Stephen is sitting down for a meal. One, when he's on this huge, amazing power high where he can do no wrong, religion is the answer, everything's right, and food is wonderful. He is becoming the artist, and he describes food and its decadence and how great and amazing it is, and how it's rejuvenating to him. And then a little bit later, when Stephen pushes things a little bit too far, as we point out quite a bit in the review, he starts to break down a little bit. He starts to question himself. He starts to ponder, is this whole religion thing even for me? Is this the right path? And at that point in time, when he's having this internal struggle with himself, it is seen through the way he is eating the food. Food is no longer a decadent ideal to him. Food is now tasteless. It is bland. It feels like it's rotting away in his stomach, much like this internal struggle within him is rotting away. So food is being used as a vehicle in this to describe the internal struggles of the character. Not just a communion between 2 characters, but an internal struggle between one, and that's why James Joyce is considered a genius, and I hate him for it. Final example. And Thomas Foster describes plenty of examples throughout his book here, but these are just examples that I have taken that have been from something we have read in the past and we've reviewed here on the channel. I did a quickie review years and years ago, The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which is a fantastic book if you are into magical realism. But in this, Letty Hempstock is our, not our main character, but our, how do I want to phrase this? This is a strange novel. We have a character, Letty Hempstock. Letty Hempstock is playing sidekick to the protagonist, but moving the story forward. It's very strange, the relationship. But anytime shit hits the fan in this novel, bad things happen, curses are slung, spells are going off here and there, we always come back to Grandma Hempstock's kitchen table, where we are always given food between the protagonist and young Letty herself and Grandma. They sit down, they have the food, and the food is rejuvenating to them. In this, the food, the communion between the two, is demonstrating safety and trust. Again, this is that communion between characters. No matter how bad things get, we can still break this bread. We can still share as a community between the 3 of us in this situation here, and we can again build that sense of trust, build that safety net that allowed us to thrive in the first place. So food is imperative. Anytime there is food being mentioned in your novel, you should probably sit back and say, now what's going on with this? Is there something I should be looking at here? Now let's take a few words from Foster himself as my dogs make noise. Well, we got here. An example from Foster's words himself. Once again, the act says, I'm with you. I share this moment with you. I feel a bond of community with you. This is a great example from Ocean at the End of the Lane, where that bond is being recreated. Once things get bad, we recover with food. We again establish that community of trust, establish that community of safety, and rejuvenate ourselves through the process of eating. Whenever people eat or drink together, it's communion. For some reasons, it's often met with slightly scandalized looks, communion having, for many readers, one or only one meaning. We talked about that a little bit, but whenever people are sitting and eating and drinking together, we are sharing with one another. We are creating that act of communion. So, this week's lesson on how to read books good. If your novel that you are reading right now is bringing up food, if characters are sitting and sharing food together, I do apologize for that, then it's definitely something important, something worth notating, and something you should sit back and say, hey, what's really going on here? So if you like this kind of thing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Give this video a like as well. We're going to try to break this book down chapter by chapter every single Friday and give you a little bit of a tidbit on how to read books a little bit better, how to get into the meat of literary analysis, and how to find things that authors are hiding within your text that you may have missed all along. And if you'd like to help us create more great content like this here on Strip Cover Lit, there is a link, as always, to our Patreon to be found in the description below.